Hello, folks. I'm LA Little, and this is your daily NeoTA wrap. Well, we take a look at these markets, and we do it from a neoclassical perspective each time, asking ourselves what happened today. What does it tell us about the coming days? Do this show 4 times a week, every Monday through Thursday. It's broadcast at or before 10 o'clock Eastern Time, archived on YouTube. It's under the channel LA Little. If you haven't subscribed, reach up there in the right-hand corner, and you can subscribe there. As far as what happened today, it wasn't a bad day in terms of percentages. If you look at the down, the Russell was the one that got hit, but elsewhere not too bad. But it was bad overall because it should have gone up. You had the overseas markets work their way higher. Our markets couldn't build on top of that, and that was despite signals suggesting that we could and should. Dollar was down, gold, silver down again. Commodities, oil down. You just had a down day across the board, and that's not what we should have seen today, and that makes you wonder what comes next. So if we look at the S&P 500, what we should notice here, and actually just kind of step this back for a second and look at it, is we had a run off the bottom of about 200, over 200 points, probably 230 points or so to the top. Now you've come back about 50. Off the top. And so you go up 220, down 50. So, you're not even a quarter of the way down. If you just draw these out and just make them, kind of equidistant, you got about 20% on each of those, right? So you're about 20% down. If you do another 20%, you'd be about 60%. That's kind of what the people do with their fib numbers, and they would probably map it in about right there. So if you're going to get another leg down, that's where you would think you would get that leg to. And if you take and draw that in to take a look at what it looks like, potentially today set up a C point. And that C point would take you down into that area where it would probably want to come back to on some sort of a natural retrace. Now the strongest markets, right, they just go up and they don't hardly give anything back. And if you look back at this, that's exactly what this did on the way up. Every time it gave something back, it was just a tiny give back, right? Each time. Up, and then you got something larger. Now you get a little bounce. Is it going to give something larger back or not? A strong market's not going to give much back. And so in this particular case, the question tomorrow and Friday is going to be, is this all you get, right, and you head on up? Or is it really going to be a deeper pullback? Is it going to come back into this area somewhere between that and this previous high? Or is it going to be smaller? Now, if it does turn around and head higher, right, without much of a pullback, and maybe it just consolidates across here for a time, that is a strong market. And that we don't know yet. What we saw today was a failure to move where you should have, and that's kind of a heads up that things aren't exactly the way you want them, not exactly the way they were drawn out. Market told us one thing yesterday, does another thing today. That tells you the read wasn't right, and you got to respect that and understand that maybe this thing really wants to pull back farther than it looked like. And if we pull this back and look at it, right, that's the ideal spot. Take you back into this area. And you're going to see that on each of the charts tonight if you look across them. Every one of them has the same setup. Another pullback potential, A, B, C, D structure to the downside potentially. If we did this one, it takes you back into this gap area on the NASDAQ composite. If you look at the NDX, it's the same thing, right? Composite, NDX. Actually, the NDX is going to probably take you a little bit deeper, it looks like. NDX would actually close that gap almost if it did it, right? So the NDX is a little bit weaker, and that's been because the big caps have been weak. But the real story is just like the real story was on the way up, and that's going to be the Russell. The Russell doing a bullish retest, regenerate. It's probably going to test that bottom tomorrow. And really, the area that's of concern here is right there. You don't want to see the Russell give this up. If the Russell gives it up, it's going to be back inside this big wide price spread, higher volume bar to be upside. And if that happens, folks, that's not a good sign. So This is where I'd be looking. I'd be watching the Russell to see what the Russell does as it comes back into this key area, which is the bottom of the bullish retest regen. If the Russell's going to hold up, that's going to give us a fairly good key that, instead of viewing this the way we're viewing it, maybe the way to view it, and actually here you got an ABCD structure that finished, but maybe the way to view it is more like this thing still wants to go higher. It's just coming back in to do some testing before it pulls back and does it again, right? So I'm watching the Russell. I'm thinking that's where we're going to get a clue. The Russell's been giving off the best clues. As for tonight, it closes inside this bar. That's a negative, but you're still over the bullish retest regenerate. So that's where I'm looking. Overseas, not much happened there. I mean, you get some strength, but nothing special. If we look here in terms of the OX markets, because that's where the action continues to be. First, we go to the dollar. The dollar was wanting to pull back. You had a huge volume coming to this thing today. Of course, we're dealing with the ETF here, so I try not to read too much in the volume here. But it's coming back into this 2574 area, which is the bottom of this little consolidation at the top. Gets to it. It looks to me like it's going to try to get into that area. Oil's kind of run into its own drummer. It's trying to break a swing point low. But things that should bounce didn't bounce. For example, silver probably should have bounced today, did not bounce, and that's with a weaker dollar. Same thing with the gold market. That one couldn't bounce. And if we go over and look at the major FXE, the major two currencies, consolidation here, just like you have on the dollar, wanting to come back into the gap area from Friday's employment number. And here's the FXY, which is the Japanese yen ETF, also trying to do the same thing. And finally, if we look at those bonds, and we'll look at the long terms, those can't lift either. So, everything that looked like you were going to get something happening to the upside today failed to trigger, and that's a negative. So in a word, I don't have much more to say. Actually, I do have one more thing to say, and that is Apple. Let me just type it in here, and we'll look at Apple together. Apple was the one that I was watching today to see if it could hold this 1606 area, and which happens to be this bar's bottom as well, the October 28th number. Gets under it, closes back over, does a little doji. That's two of them now. This one's actually still wanting to try to push back up. Couldn't get anything on the upside today, but it got under, back over, less volume one more time. Looks to me like that tech stock at least wants to try to head the other way. And you got a lot of these tech stocks that have really moved a lot. Amazon today was another one. Let me pop that one in. This thing just keeps screaming higher. You got ABCD structures on the upside. It's just about to play out again. Let me see if we draw them in. You kind of had this one, right? You had another one here that played out. That one's actually quite extended. Another small one here that's played out, or about to play out. Actually, it's gone this far, so a little bit farther up. But Amazon has just been a beast to the top side. And not most of them are not moving like Amazon, but you've got a few of these big cap tech stocks that just keep holding this thing up, and they're not giving it up. And if we look at, there was three that reported together, if you remember, on that big gap up on the NDX. One was Amazon, one was Microsoft, MSFT. Let me put that one in. So Microsoft also hanging up here, hasn't given it up. And Google was another one. If we look at Google, same thing, right? It's up there hanging at the highs. So the big three that pushed this market hard, they're all hanging up there. If you go back and you look at February of last year, or actually this year still, but February, that was when, and I'm going to pull up the NDX again here, so bear with me a second. Okay, now here's the NDX. Let's go to the weekly though. Remember, December is consolidation. You got the push up here. Let me get my markers out. So you had the consolidation here end of year, right? February, you get the push up, new leg up, right? Breakout. And then what happens, right? Tries to hand that off You know, you got a push from about 41 up to 45. It's a 400, almost a 10% move. Well, it was a 10% move almost, just barely shy of it. And then what happens? It tries to hand it off on a rotation to the rest of the market. Rest of the market never shows up. And then we just kind of consolidate three little bumps up while the S&P couldn't move. And then eventually got that big push down as a result of it. Well, folks, here we are again. You just had the big push again from 41 this time to 47. So it's a 600-point move, 12%, 13%. Now you're wanting to hand it off to somebody who's going to show up to take the handoff. So far, that rotation isn't happening. You know, if you look at the S&P, you're not getting it here in the S&P. The rotation isn't coming to it. You're seeing everything fade after tech has made its run. That's what happened in February this year. That's the question now. Are we going to see it hand off or are we not? Now, this, of course, is the more bullish part of the year. You know, the seasonals are much more favorable now than they were then. But so far, we don't see anybody stepping up. And that's going to be the question over the next, 2, 3, 4 weeks. Somebody going to step up or not? Are you going to get that December, anywhere from October up to about January run, or are you not? I think you will, but so far, no handoff. That's it for tonight. I'll catch you tomorrow. We'll see where this market ends up. They're going to test the downside tomorrow, right? They were unable to do what they should have today. They're going to test this downside tomorrow. They're going to try to break it down. Russell's the one to watch. Check it out and see what it does. I'll see you then. Have a great one. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Good night, folks.